Hello everyone, in this video I'll be doing an unbiased review of Dragon Age The Veilguard. Now, this game has been quite controversial, and I just want to give my thoughts on this game as someone that's played all of the Dragon Age games and a majority of BioWare's games in the past. My favorites being Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic and the Baldur's Gate series, which was made by BioWare. Also, Dragon Age Origins, my favorite game in the series. I don't think this game will top the dark fantasy setting that Dragon Age Origins has. This game almost feels like the Marvelification of video games, where things are serious in tone, but lots of goofy banter. Now, I have a lot of thoughts about this game already, and there's some good things and there's some bad things about this game. As with any game, there's always the good with the bad. But I do think that the highlights of this game do kind of outweigh some of the negatives. But I guess the first thing that I want to address here is the kind of controversy over this game being woke. Now, there's some small changes that you can make at the very start of the game. You don't have to see them again, so they won't hurt your feelings if you are offended by those things, but you can choose different things like pronouns, which some people are putting up a big fuss over. Now, Baldur's Gate 3 didn't really get the same kind of reception, which you can do those same changes in this game. There's some other options, but they're kind of hidden away in menus, and you don't even have to look at them. They're gone if you just scroll past it. But I just want to touch on that first, because I know that's going to be the comments that I'll be getting, because I've already gotten some comments after releasing one video on this game. People saying you should not play this because it's too woke. I don't think that it's shoving anything down your throat, unlike the games Concord and Dustborn, which released this year with a lot of themes that were a bit too on the nose, but I do think that this game is pretty fun overall. I wouldn't let that get you discouraged if you're someone that doesn't like that kind of stuff. Now, the things that stand out to it are the combat. It's definitely a lot different than Dragon Age Origins and even Dragon Age Inquisition. The pacing in the combat is a lot more fast-paced, and that is, I think, for its own benefit, because the way that games are going nowadays with Souls-likes and kind of the fast-paced combat, you have to be doing things quick to keep people engaged with your combat systems. Otherwise, it starts to feel dated, because there's a lot of other options out there for video games. Now, there are a bunch of different skill points. You can have 3 characters in your team at all times, one of them being yourself, so you can choose 2 allies. And then you got their own skill selection here, and they do kind of work together. Like you can see here when I mouse over Debilitate here, it does combo with my mage's Icebreaker. So you can set up some synergetic pairings here. It also does combo with my own attacks too. So what's cool is there's 3 different classes with 3 subclasses each. So there's a mage, a rogue, and a fighter style class. And in that, they all have their own subclasses, which I'll just show off briefly here. So I picked a mage. And the skill tree is quite large here. You got 3 different specializations: the Death Caller for the mage, the Evoker, which is kind of like an ice mage, and then a Spell Blade, which works on daggers and casting with a electricity focus. So I think overall this is a pretty decent way of going about a skill tree. The skills feel actually impactful. It's not like 10% more damage. It's more so like you get another slot for casting. You can do things like add additional projectiles to your castings. You can do additional control abilities, and they're actually quite strong in what they do. So like even this one will add a shocking effect to your weapons when you attack. Overall, I do think the skill tree seems pretty decent so far. Companions also get their own skill trees too, so you can go through and upgrade their own skills depending on your relationship with the characters. So it's pretty fleshed out. Each character has their own type of skill tree that you go through. And I do think it is pretty well built so far. I've been having fun with it, but it may leave something to be desired if you're a really big fan of Dragon Age Origins and really wanted the game to return to its roots in that game. But overall, I do think that the combat itself is pretty fun. So to show off some of the combat here, we got our main casting button, so you can just attack like this. This is for the mage, obviously. And then you also have the ability to pull up this wheel here with different spells. Like it'll show you which ones are going to be most impactful. So we got our Chain Lightning here, which I'll use on this enemy. And then you got your opponent or your teammate's ability, so I can use this Debilitate attack here. And I'll just cast that there. And then we can go ahead with our impactful Icebreaker here, which will then do a little bit extra damage. And you can see there, it took them down. So it's a pretty decent combat system. I think it's fun to play. You got the ability to block, you got the ability to dodge roll, and you can do a bunch of different things, like you can knock enemies back there. I almost got taken out. You can also use your spell casting from range. So it's an interesting combat system that I think is pretty rewarding. I do know that it could get a little bit annoying after a long period of time, and just doing the same things over and over again, which things like Black Myth Wukong, which has kind of a similar combat system as you play it throughout the game. I do note when I got to the very end of that game that I was starting to get burnt out with its combat, but for the most part, I do think it's pretty fresh. I wish you could control your teammates like in the other Dragon Age games, because that was one of the things when your main character gets wiped out and you got to play as your other characters. That is tough, and I think that that brought a lot of fun to the game. You don't really get that in this game. In classic BioWare fashion, you do have the ability to choose different dialogue options that leads to different effects. Now, one thing that I want to highlight that's really cool about this game is anytime there's a major decision, the game will actually autosave for you, so that if you decide you didn't like that ability or that choice that you made, you can actually go back in time and undo your choice. But you got here like the good answer, or the thumbs up answer, the comedic answer, and then the tough answer. There's a bunch of other choices too, so it does have a bit of, as I said previously, the marvelification of gaming, where things, when they're really dark, has a bit of a comedic tone to it, which I think is not very suitable at times. Like, this is the end of the world and people are joking around a lot. In Dragon Age Origins, it kind of had a completely different tone. Also, the graphics, I know a lot of people want to complain about that. I do think that there's some highlights and some things that are nice about it, like the hair mechanics are really nice. We're looking at a bald character right now as I say that, but the hair physics are really well done in this game. As you move around, like each piece of hair feels like it's actually graphically done. But also there's that comedic, not even comedic, but cell shaded kind of toon look to the characters, which I don't particularly love, but I feel like the graphics are all right. Nothing to hate, nothing to love, but the thing is, this game runs really, really well. So we're gonna listen again, you idiot. The game is running at about 150 frames per second right now. I'm running this at a RTX 4070 with everything maxed out, ultra graphics. So this is pretty good for, honestly, a game that's come out when we've had some other games by EA, like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, which had terrible frame pacing and could barely hit 30 frames per second on nice graphics cards. So there's some pros and cons to this graphics style. I mean, it may not be the most beautiful thing to look at. Some of the locations look really nice. The characters are all right. They do kind of look a little bit toonish, but for it to run at like 150 frames per second is pretty crazy to see. Games that release also no de novo on this on release, which is huge because I know that there was a lot of games that released with that. So EA at least is listening. So I think that that is a huge step forward for gamers, that we're actually getting our word out there that we don't want things like de novo in our games. So that is really nice to see. But obviously some people don't like this graphic style, so that may not be for them, but it is pretty easy to ignore. You get used to it after playing it for a little while, but I can understand if someone didn't like it. But I do think if you're interested in the Dragon Age lore, there's a lot of that in this game. It may not do things from Inquisition how you want. You do have some choices at the start of the game, and it doesn't go too in depth to make it feel like your choices in that game mattered a whole lot, but at least it didn't completely ignore it. What I do think that they should have maybe done is made this game maybe like 50 years in the future and had the choices not matter that much, because it almost feels like they half did it in this game. It's not very well done, I would say. I don't think that this game is a bad game by any means. I do think that there's a lot to enjoy about this game, so you may as well give it a shot, see if it's something your style, because I do think that the game is pretty decent. Now, I do know a lot of retailers were giving this a 9 out of 10. I don't think it's that good to give a 9 out of 10. We'll have to wait and see once I finish the game. I would say though it's probably a solid 8. I mean, it's not a bad game, it's not an incredible game, but it's still a pretty good game nonetheless. I wouldn't put it on my game of the year list, but that still belongs to Astrobot, believe it or not. But this game is pretty well done, and I do need to highlight that they did a great job with this. And there may be some tones that people don't really like, but for the most part, it is a pretty fun adventure, and the new advancements that they've done in the combat are pretty interesting. So I do think that if you're looking for something new in the BioWare Dragon Age world, you may as well give this game a shot, because there is some cool things that they've done, and yeah, you got a lot of things to look forward to in this game. There's so much that happens, and I just can't wait to get further into this game. So just want to give my thoughts on the Dragon Age The Veilguard. Again, this is a unbiased review. It's just giving my thoughts, and yeah, you may not agree with it, but hey, I just want to give my thoughts. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button below, and I'll see you all in the next video.